What's up? It's your boy Andre back at you with another video, and I'm here to review the movie Scream 2022, the one that came out basically this year, a few months ago, back in January. Um, I heard a lot of good things about this movie when it came out, so I was kind of disappointed I couldn't see it, and I was going to rent it, but I saw it was on Paramount. So obviously, I went and was just waiting for free time, and I finally got a chance to watch. And I gotta say, it was actually turned out to be pretty good. Now there were a few parts that kind of pissed me off. Like, I'm not gonna, lie. I'm gonna be honest with you. But overall, um, just the way they did the movie, like the style, the playing to like different tropes of like horror movies in itself, it worked. It worked for the most part. Um, I'm just hoping that they leave this as like the last movie. Like, most of the Scream movies since the first one have been all right, but it's just at some point you got to stop milking the cow. I'm not gonna mention any names for certain movie franchises. Um, yeah, and if you can make a decent movie, then yeah, you know, so be it. But if your movie's like not good, then but anyway, enough for other movies. We here to talk about Scream. So it starts off with um, Jenny Ortega's character, Tara. That's her name, Tara. And you get the infamous phone call, and she was messaging her friend, and apparently she wasn't messaging her friend. She was messaging somebody else. She figures it out because the killer gives it away, like who they really are. So they had sent like this, fake video that they took probably beforehand, obviously, because unless there were both of them, there was one at the house and then one, there, but obviously we'll never know. Even if you watch the movie, they don't really go into explain it. But anyway, basically, the classic killer calls. They're talking to the killer, and they get in the house. They after somehow playing back and forth with the locking mechanism on the house, and Tara kind of gets fucked up. She gets stabbed. Her ankle gets. I think it was her ankle gets broken. They step on it and like snap, snap, crackle, pop, and then she gets stabbed through the hand, and they stab her a few times, and they go for the overshot, and then it's just a scream, and it cuts, and it's like I was disappointed at first because I was like, they told me she don't die at the beginning like we assume and stuff like that. Like they didn't people didn't tell me if she survived or if she died, but it was like, yeah, she's still in the movie for a little bit. I'm like, okay, okay. And then that happened, and I thought to myself, look, if you don't see the person die on screen, there's a high possibility that they're gonna come back, and she ends up surviving. So automatically, right there, knowing the classic trope for Scream movies and knowing that they were kind of playing to the original, I'm like, okay, her sister is a killer, possible killers like suspect. She's like number one. I'm like, then we found out about the boyfriend Richie, and I'm like, all right, those top two suspects right there. And then they introduced Dewey very early on into the movie, and they she just kind of dropped a bomb there early on that Tara has an older sister named Sam, and Sam is the daughter of the original killer, Mr. Loomis, that was in the original um, first Scream movie, and she kind of has um, these little flashbacks and stuff. One, I wouldn't say flashbacks, like these little visions that she talked to him because she takes these prescription drugs and stuff like that, and story kind of progresses on, and then you slowly get introduced into um, they after Dewey they introduce uh, I can't Cindy. Yeah, they introduce Cindy, and then they kind of introduce Gail like that in the same scene, but he don't call her. He kind of just texts, but she pops up later on in the movie too, obviously. And then from there, like things kind of start getting juicy. There was another kill. It was kind of like it wasn't a nobody. He was related to somehow somebody magically. They like kind of, but I mean, his character just kind of really played nothing but a plot point to die. And then you had the sheriff. Um, I think her name is Hicks, Sheriff Hicks. Her and her son, they basically get killed. Like he plays with her, saying like, "Hey, I'm gonna gut your son." She goes back to the house, and that scene kind of pissed me off a little bit because like you're the sheriff of the town, right? The supposed person who's supposed to be playing the Ghostface killer comes back, and you know he's back, and he's supposed to be at your house talking about killing your son, and you're the sheriff, and you don't have your gun. Like that scene just kind of like I had to pause it, like because I was just like kind of mad, like kind of thing. But it's like okay, it's whatever. And then the whole when they kill the son, they keep playing to him opening doors and the refrigerator and cabinets and all this stuff and zooming in like, oh, the killer's gonna pop up and then nothing. I'm thinking to myself, look, this motherfucker gotta pop up at one point, and he finally does, and he fucking kills the son. So that's he was gone, and then after that they go back to the hospital because the sister who survived. I mean, obviously they didn't know if somebody was still protecting her, and you know, she kind of gets out of bed. And this scene kind of pissed me off a little bit too because it's like, I get it's a small town, but you got one cop, okay, he ends up getting killed. And then the lights go out, and she gets into the wheelchair with her fucked up knee with the brace on, her hand all shot the shit, all wrapped up, and gets in the wheelchair and is rolling, and there's like her hand is messed up, there's blood on it, and it's like in pain. I'm just like, why couldn't she just like close the door? Like, why does she have to roll out? And then it's like, what the hell happened to the doctors? Like, there's the dead cop, but where are the nurses? Like, that are supposed to be in the hospital? Where the hell is everybody? Where are the patients? Like, but I believe they did say that they was supposed to put her on a secluded floor, but that still doesn't make sense as to if the power went out. Like, where did the nurses go? Like, there should be like a dead nurse at the counter, at the desk, but there wasn't. So that's like I said, that scene kind of threw me off. And then basically, they're talking on the phone to the killer, and they're like, you want to kill your sister or your boyfriend? And this is what kind of the movie kind of played to making it seem like Richie could have possibly been the killer because he goes to the hospital and the killer sees him and it don't kill him. They just kind of like cut his arm kind of thing, and he I guess he hit his head or something because he's unconscious. It's one of them. It's this sequence of scenes with them going to the hospital, and in the hospital has some bad editing, but I'm gonna let them slide. I'm gonna let them. I'm gonna let them slide. I still don't know how a movie like this it reached out, but anyway, we're not gonna talk about it. We're gonna go back on into the movie. So, um, yeah, basically, they stalling for time. You know, they get into a confrontation with the Ghostface killer, and they try to kill Dewey, and Dewey shoots them 3 times. And as they're getting on the elevator, Dewey's like, "Yeah, I gotta shoot them in the head because they always come back." Like clocks it, horror trope. And Sam is like, "Bitch, who cares? Let's go. Fuck that shit." Like, and he's like, "I care," and I'm like, he's about to die. That's exactly what happened. He dies, and I'm kind of pissed off. He died. He go out like that, but they at least made his kill like kind of very good though. I'll give them that. They kind of made up with it for how he get killed. So then it goes on from there, and basically this is where Cindy basically comes back to town, and Cindy's like, "Hey, like I can help you, like I'm you gonna need it." And Sam's like, "Nah, we just about to get the fuck out of here." And it's like okay. So now they're like limiting it down, with the suspects. And now I'm thinking more to myself like, it's definitely probably Richie is one of them. So as they're leaving town, Cindy ends up putting a tracker on the car, so they're tracking them, and her sister Tara ends up losing her inhaler. And guess where the other inhaler is? At her friend's house, who at the beginning, that was the person that she thought was like, about to get killed, but wasn't. And it's at her house, and it's just okay. Like this is just it's a sus. I'm like for sure, it's definitely Richie, and on their way there, someone gets killed. So it kind of ruled out Tara for me for the most part. I'm like, all right, Tara's probably not it. Like she didn't go through all that just to kind of get back at her sister, for all that time. So it's definitely Richie. So, of course, like the other killers in the friend group, and they brought that up, later in the movie or earlier in the movie. Obviously, Sheriff Hicks' son get killed. Then there's Liv, who likes the one guy. I can't remember his. I think it's Chad named Chad. I think his name is Chad. He has a sister named Mindy. I like Mindy. Mindy's cool. Mindy's cool. Mindy was one of my favorite, even though she didn't have a lot of screen time. She was still probably one of my favorite characters in the movie. So, um, basically, they go to the house, and who was it that ended up um, getting? I think it might have been Chad. Yeah, it was Chad. He went out to look for Liv, who didn't nobody know where she was, and he ends up. I think he survives. At the end, they show somebody in the house in the other ambulance, but I'm not sure. They cut from it so quick. But his sister survives. So I'll get into all that. I'm getting sidetracked. I'm sorry. So, um, basically, they get to the house. They pull up, and one of the girls says like, "Hey, like everybody got to leave. Party's over," because there was a party going on for some reason, and that was kind of like suspect. I'm like, okay. And then there's a scene too where Mindy and that girl who ends up being the second killer kind of have this back and forth like kind of dialogue, um, like kind of thing. But I didn't feel like it was really needed to bring up. So as they things happening, Liv comes back and she's like, yeah, you know, I don't know what you're talking about with your brother Mindy. Like I haven't seen him, and she goes storming off. And as Mindy's watching the movie, Ghostface comes in and stabs her, and she falls over. Not she falls. She's falling over. Sam comes in and steps in, and Ghostface runs off, and then um, I can't remember the other girl's name. That's the killer. She comes in, I believe, with Tara. I think it is. Or Richie came in with Tara, and they're like, "Oh my God, what's going on?" And then, they're coming in, and then they're like, "You're the killer, you're the killer," like kind of thing. They're saying Liv was the killer. The girl who was the actual second killer was saying Liv was the killer, and Liv's like, "Yeah, y'all just want to blame it on me." And the girl's like, "Oh, I know." She pulls like a gun and pow, shoots Liv in the head. Liv gone. I'm like, oh, and then this where all chaos, all hell breaks loose. Um, Basically, like Tara gets locked in the closet, and then Richie and Sam are hiding, and Sam's like, yeah, like, nah, we just need to hide. We need to stay here. And he's like manipulating her, trying to say like, her sister was doing it. And I guess she kind of like really didn't believe him because he was like, yeah, there's always two killers. And after that, I was like, that motherfucker is definitely one of the killers. Like, with the limited of people, it was him. My hunch was right all along. They played classic to the whole trope, and they go upstairs. She has a confrontation. Well, Sydney goes upstairs. Oh no, I forgot to mention that part when Sydney and Gail get to the house. The girl who's the shot Liv comes out. She's like, "Oh, I've been stabbed," and they're like, this bitch. They're like, what do you think? They're like, it's a trap, it's a trap. She go, oh fuck it, and she shoots and she hits Gail. And that's when Cindy goes into the house, and Cindy goes in, and Cindy's just busting caps everywhere, trying to figure out where this girl went. And she ends up shooting in a closet, and Richie's in there. And I'm like, that wasn't where Richie just was like not too long ago. Like I'm kind of you a little sus now for sure. Like we gonna have to vote you out among us style type thing. And the other girl comes out in the whole Ghostface outfit, and her and Liv kind of go back and forth, and they fall over. Sam goes to get the gun, and as the boyfriend Richie comes up, he stabs her, and that's where they play into the whole thing. Basically, their reasoning for doing it was, I guess they were kind of together, but they wanted to. They didn't like Stab Eight. They were one of those very eccentric people who basically crave serial killers, um, that kind of thing. But they were doing it to the movie. They felt like the movie didn't do any justice, so they wanted to make their own movie, kind of thing. Because she's the killer. She's the daughter of the original killer. Like they could kind of pin it on her because Cindy killed her dad and all this little BS. And obviously things don't go as planned. Tara ends up being freed. They weren't expecting that. Tara gets into it with the other girl that's the killer, and then um, Richie, it's a whole bunch of clusterfuck that happens, and then they go back to the kitchen, and um, who was that? The girl, who was the killer. She ends up getting into it with Gail and Cindy, and they beforehand they threw like hand sanitizer on her, and as this girl gets pushed, um, she turns on the stove somehow. She turns the knob on the stove, and when her and Cindy gets into a fight, Cindy gets the gun and she gives it to Gail, and Gail shoots her because the girl told her, "Well, it's time to pass on the torch." And Gail said, "Okay," so she shoots her, and the girl falls onto the stove, and she just lights on fire. And Gail like makes this pass the torch joke, and it was hilarious. And then they cut back to Richie fighting with Sam, and in that whole instance, I forgot or Tara or no, they have a fight. They go back and forth, and she's crawling away, and he's talking all his trash, and she ends up saying something, "Don't fuck with the daughter of a serial killer," and she gets the advantage, and she stabs the shit out of this man, and she had to stab him at least 15 times. And I'm like, how is he still alive? I don't understand. And then he's like, "But what about my ending?" She goes, "Here it comes," and she slits his throat. And as she's doing that and he dies, Cindy and Gail come in, and they're like, "Oh," and they're like, "Well, he could always come back." So Sam takes the gun, shoots him twice in the chest and in the head. And they're like, "Well, okay then." That's what Gail says. And as they're doing that, the other girl who was a killer somehow was still alive. Like her whole face is like melted. And as she's running, you hear pow, and Tara had got the other gun to shoot her. And basically, that's kind of what happened. Mindy survives because I was rooting this whole time for Mindy to just come back from being stabbed and save the day, but they did not do that. They should have did that. But the house that they ended up going to was the original house, Stu's house that it happened in the first one, and that's basically how it ends. Her and her sister Sam and Tara, kind of going about their way. Mindy survives. I think it was her brother because when she goes past, she gives a thumbs up. I tried a little bit to go back and pause, but I really couldn't tell, and I'm like, I'm not even going to stress it. I'm just going to take a guess because there's nobody else really in the house that it could have been. Liv got shot in the head, so the only other person it could have been was Chad. So and then Sam goes says something to Sydney, and then that's just how the movie end. And I was waiting. I'm like, don't try to do no little twist at the end. They didn't do that, and that's just kind of how they ended it. So yeah, this was like I said, it was definitely good. I wasn't expecting it to really be bad, but it was definitely better than I expected. I was expecting like kind of an average movie, kind of like the plot really wouldn't make sense, but the plot was like very well put together. I really liked it. It wasn't really too many or you can say any plot holes or anything like that. So, if I'm going to rate this movie, um, out of 10, because I do out of 10 ratings, I would give this movie a solid 8. I mean, for a movie that's kind of like as Mindy would call it, a requel, as she named it in the movie. I love her character. Um, yeah, it was definitely solid. It had a good, story. Um, I thought about giving it like a 7.5. I'm like, no, it was put together. If they would have had some other things happen in the movie, I probably would have had to rate it a little lower. But overall, it was solid. Um, if you're a fan of the Scream movies, I would definitely recommend it. If you're into horror movies, I would definitely recommend it. Um, yeah, so I'm sorry this video was kind of long. I got a little bit sidetracked, but um, yeah. But anyways, I'm going to end this video here. If you are new to this channel and you are not subscribed, please, if you watch this, please like and hit the subscribe button for future videos. And thank you guys, and I will see you next time. Peace.